Okay, so we're going to talk about the distance and midpoint formulas in this lesson. All right, so how do we find the distance between 2 points? And in this graph, you can see I have a couple of points. How can I figure out what the distance is? Now, if it was vertical or horizontal, we could just count. So, like if this were straight up and down, like this, I would know, okay, well that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 units long. But it's at a diagonal, so I know it has to be more than 6. And so that's what we're going to try to find. We want to know the exact answer for that. And we can use something called the distance formula, which is a modification of the Pythagorean theorem. And it looks kind of scary at the start. So this is the distance formula. D is equal to the square root of x2 minus x1 squared plus y2 minus y1 squared. And this is used to find the distance between two ordered pairs. So 2 points in space. Here you can see these 2 points right here. So 2 points, x1, y1 would be x and y from the first point, and x2, y2 would be x and y from the second point. So we look at this picture again. I want to first identify what are the points that we're looking at in this problem. So this point right here is -5, 3. And this point right here is -2, -3. Okay, so based on the formula up here, I'm just going to use what it says to do that. So the distance between those 2 points has to be equal to the square root. Let's call this point 1 and this point 2. It doesn't matter which one you do, but for our purposes, let's just do that. Okay, so x2 would be the x from the second point. So that's -2 minus x1. So that would be that one. And that's -5 minus -5. Close the parenthesis, and I'm going to square that. And then add to that y2. So y from the second point, -3, minus y1, which is 3. And then we're going to square that. Okay, so now we're going to do -2 minus -5. And then -3 minus 3, which is -6 squared. Make sure that's in parentheses. Okay, now we're going to square both of these, and you could probably do that in your head, but one thing to keep in note, when you square something, so let me pull up my calculator here. If I do 3 squared, 3 squared, you know, is 9, right? But if I do -6 squared, and I just type it in like this, you're going to get the wrong answer. You're going to get -36. We want to always make sure if there's a negative in it, you're going to have to use parentheses and go -6 and then squared. Because we know that -6 times -6 is positive 36. So that's something to just keep in mind when you're using your calculator. Okay, so this is 9, and this is 36. Okay, we're going to add those two together, and I would have the square root of 45. So the distance between these 2 points is whatever the square root of 45 is. So let's pop back open our calculator and do second, there we go. Square root of 45 is 6.708. We're going to round to the nearest tenth, so 1 decimal place, we'll say 6.7. So this is approximately 6.7 units long, which we knew was more than 6, and that makes sense then. Okay. Let's try one more to just make sure we understand that. So in this one, Again, we'll call this point 1 and this point 2. If it helps to label, you can. But, okay, so the distance formula we're going to do x2, so 11, minus x1, negative 7, squared, plus y2, minus y1, squared. Okay, now we're going to simplify those. So 11 minus negative 7 is 18. So I have 18 squared plus, and then 3 minus negative 2 is 5 squared. So now I need to figure out what 18 squared is. I'm going to do my 18 squared is 324. And then I know that 5 squared, right, is 25. But I want to add those two together. So 324 plus 25. Okay. And that's 324 plus 5 squared, which was 25. If I add those together, I get the square root of 349. Now we need to figure out what that is. $349. Looks like, so 18.68, since the next number is an 8. I want to round that up to 16 or 18.7. So the distance between these 2 points here and here is 18.7 units. Okay, so that's the distance formula. That's how you find how far it is between a couple of points. The midpoint formula is you basically take the averages of your x's and the averages of the y's. So add them up and divide by 2, since there's 2 of them. Notice this is an ordered pair. So your answer should be an ordered pair because it's the middle of a segment. So it's used to find the midpoint of 2 points. So here it says, let's say I have GH. So I have a segment, GH. We don't really know where it is, somewhere. And they want to know where's right in the middle of that. Well, they tell us what the points are, the endpoint coordinates are. So we're going to use those. And we're going to follow this formula up here. It says x1. So x from the first point would be 7, and x2, we're going to add those together, which is 9. So 7 plus 9. Then we're going to divide it by 2, comma, that's our first coordinate. And then we're going to do the y's. So then we're going to do y2. So that would be this one, or y1 and y2. Add those two together. So it's negative 5 plus negative 1. And we're going to divide those by 2 as well. Okay, so 7 plus 9 is 16. And negative 5 plus negative 1 is negative 6. So 16 divided by 2 is 8. Negative 6 divided by 2 is negative 3. The midpoint of this segment lies at the point 8, negative 3. It's a pretty easy formula to use. Just get it used to the notation. Okay, let's try one more, make sure we're okay, and then we'll try some ones that are variations and can make it a little bit trickier. Okay, so, all right, so the midpoint is equal to x1 plus x2, so negative 7 plus 3 divide that by 2, comma, and then now let's do the y's. So y1, 4, plus negative 4 is y2 divided by 2. Negative 7 plus 3 is negative 4. 4 plus negative 4 is 0. Okay, so negative 4 divided by 2 is negative 2. 0 divided by 2 is 0. So the midpoint of segment AB lies at the point negative 2, 0. All right. So now you know the distance in midpoint formulas. Let's talk about some things that could be a little bit trickier. So how do we find a missing endpoint? We're given some coordinates, maybe of one of the endpoints and the midpoint. How do we find the other endpoint? So it says here, find the coordinates of J if K is the midpoint of JL. So sometimes it's helpful to draw a picture. It doesn't matter. Let's do a better picture than that. There we go. It doesn't matter where you draw it. It doesn't have to be in the exact thing. We're just using it for reference. So I know that this is J and this is L. And somewhere in the middle, right in the middle, is K. Okay. So we know that K is located at negative 5, 10. We also know that L has the coordinates negative 8, 6. So what we're trying to find is what are the coordinates of J? Okay, so we can do that. If we know that the midpoint is negative 5, 10, we know the formula for the midpoint. So we're going to, instead of writing M equals, we're going to put the fact that negative 5, 10 is equal to that, right? So since that's the case, then let's do our formula. Okay, so the first coordinate has to be the two endpoints added together. Well, we don't know this one, so we're going to call it x1 plus x2, which is negative 8. We're going to divide that by 2. That has to be equal to, or the y value would be y2, excuse me, y1 plus y2, which is 6, divided by 2. So we're saying we don't know what y1 is here, but we do need to know that y2 is 6. And then that divided by 2. Now, that has to be equal to, this is kind of what I was starting to write before, but I didn't want to get us too confused. So we know that these are equal. So this has to equal this. And this has to equal this. So let's write that. And then we can do some solving. And hopefully this will make some more sense. Okay, so we have negative 5 then equals x1 plus negative 8 over 2. All right, let's solve this equation. So what we want to do to get rid of this, first we want to get rid of this divided by 2. So we're going to multiply by 2 on both sides. I get negative 10 over here equals x1, or just x, plus negative 8. So now I want to add 8 to both sides. I get negative 2 equals x, or x1, however you want to think about it. And then let's do the y. We know that 10 has to be equal to this. So we're going to write that over here. 10 equals y1 plus 6 divided by 2. So we still are going to do the same thing here to solve this. Multiply by 2 on both sides. You get 20 equals y1 plus 6. We don't really need the y1 anymore. I'm going to subtract 6 from both sides, so 14 equals y. So now I know what x and y are. So I'm simply going to just write that out, okay, as an ordered pair. So the other endpoint, j, is equal to x is -2, y is 14. J is that. Okay, a little bit more work for that, but you're still using that same formula and just using your algebra skills. Okay. All right, I just want to do one last one. So more practice. This one has some algebra in here and just making sure that this makes sense to you. Again, it's really important to read these carefully and then draw yourself a picture. So it says, if G is the midpoint of segment FH, FG is equal to 14x plus 25, and the length of GH is 73 minus 2x. Find the length of FH. Okay. So let's draw ourselves a picture. We know this is F and this is H, and the midpoint is right here. So these two segments are the same because G is the midpoint. I know that FG is 14x plus 25, and I also know that GH is 73 minus 2x. Okay, now because G is the midpoint, we know that this and this have to equal each other. They have to be the same length. So we're going to write that. 14x plus 25 is equal to 73 minus 2x. Okay, so I'm going to add 2x to both sides to get all my x's on one side. I have 16x plus 25 equals 73. Okay, and then I want to subtract x, or subtract 25 from both sides. You get 16x equals, and then this is 48. Okay. Divide by 16 on both sides. And that gives me 3. So x is equal to 3. Remember, we're trying to find FH. So I know that the two segments are congruent, so I'm going to pick one of the segments to plug in, and then for x, and see what I get. So let's do FG. So I know that FG is equal to 14x plus 25, right? So I'm going to put in 3 for x. Okay, so we're going to go 14 times 3, which is 42 plus 25. So that gives me 67. Okay, well, if this is 67, then so is this. So I just need to go 67 times 2. And that gives me the whole length. So FH is equal to 134. There we go. Okay, there you go. That's everything. Hope that makes sense. Write a summary of your notes, and then give the assignment a shot. Okay, see ya.